"Happy birthday to me," I whispered, standing frozen in the doorway of my husband's study. Marcus didn't notice me. He was too busy showing his secretary Sarah the divorce papers spread across his mahogany desk. "The party's perfect timing," she purred, running her fingers along his shoulder. "Once the guests leave, you can tell her everything's over." I should have known something was wrong when Marcus insisted on hosting my 40th birthday party at our home instead of the restaurant I'd chosen. "It'll be more intimate," he'd said, that practiced smile playing across his face. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." The same smile. He'd perfected over 15 years of marriage, the one that had convinced countless juries of his sincerity. The spring evening had started perfectly. Our Victorian house was filled with the warmth of laughter and conversation, the scent of roses, my favorite flowers, wafting through every room. Friends, colleagues, and family members mingled in the garden, their voices carrying through the open French doors. I'd spent weeks planning every detail, from the handwritten place cards to the artisanal cake waiting in the kitchen. "Have you seen Marcus?" I asked my best friend Diana, who was sipping champagne by the koi pond. She frowned slightly, her dark eyes scanning the crowd. "I think I saw him heading inside with Sarah. Probably some urgent case they need to discuss." Sarah Williams, his new secretary of 8 months, young, ambitious, and always perfectly composed in her designer suits. I'd noticed how she looked at him during the office Christmas party, but I'd dismissed it as simple admiration. After all, Marcus was one of Boston's most respected defense attorneys. Everyone looked at him that way. "On your birthday?" Diana's voice carried a note of concern. That's a bit much, even for Marcus. Something in her tone made my stomach clench. I'd been ignoring the signs for months, the late nights at the office, the mysterious weekend meetings, the way he'd changed his phone's password. But tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be about us, about celebrating. "I'll go find them," I said, forcing a smile. "Make sure everyone's getting enough champagne." I walked through our home, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors. The sound echoed through the hallways, past the family photos that lined the walls, memories of happier times, of vacations in the Maldives, Christmas mornings, and lazy Sunday brunches. Each step felt heavier than the last as I approached. Marcus's study. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of warm light spilling into the darkened hallway. I heard their voices before I saw them, hushed but clear in the relative quiet of the house's interior. "Everything's prepared." Sarah's voice, silky and confident. "I've double-checked all the documents. Once you serve her the papers tonight, there's nothing she can do." "You're sure about the timing?" Marcus's voice, the one he used when strategizing a case. "After the party seems cruel." "It's perfect timing," Sarah replied. "She'll be emotional, vulnerable, more likely to sign quickly without scrutinizing everything. We've worked too hard to let her find out about the offshore accounts or the property transfers." I stood there, my hand pressed against the doorframe, my world tilting on its axis. The party sounds faded to a distant hum as blood rushed in my ears. Through the gap in the door, I could see them clearly. Sarah perched on the edge of his desk, her skirt riding up her thighs, while Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, divorce papers spread between them like a battle plan. "You're brilliant, you know that?" Marcus said, reaching for her hand. "I couldn't have planned this without you. Once everything's settled, we can finally be together openly." "And the prenup?" Sarah asked, her fingers intertwining with his. Marcus laughed, that rich, confident laugh I'd once loved. "Ironclad. She'll walk away with barely enough to rent an apartment. After all, I drafted it myself." The crystal champagne flute in my hand suddenly felt too heavy. I watched as Sarah leaned down, her lips meeting Marcus's in a practiced kiss. They'd done this before, probably countless times, right here in our home. We should head back, Sarah said, pulling away. People will notice we're gone. Let them, Marcus replied, pulling her closer. In a few hours, none of it will matter. I backed away from the door, my legs trembling. 15 years of marriage, of building a life together, and he'd planned to end it all on my birthday, in front of our friends and family. The humiliation would have been absolute, exactly as they'd planned. Diana was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, concern etched across her face. One look at me and she knew. What happened? She whispered, taking the champagne flute from my shaking hand. I need your help, I managed to say, my voice steadier than I felt. And I need you to call your brother. Diana's brother Michael was a forensic accountant who'd helped uncover some of Boston's biggest financial frauds. If Marcus thought he could hide money from me, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. Whatever you need, Diana said, already pulling out her phone. But first, we need to get through this party without letting them know you've discovered their plan. I nodded, straightening my shoulders. Marcus had taught me something after all those years of watching him in court. Sometimes the best defense is making your opponent think they're winning. I would let them have their moment, let them think their plan was proceeding perfectly. Help me fix my makeup, I said to Diana. We have a party to host. As I reapplied my lipstick in the powder room, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me, her eyes harder, her smile sharper. Marcus and Sarah thought they had orchestrated the perfect plan, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I walked back into the party, accepting birthday wishes with practiced grace. Marcus and Sarah had returned, standing, slightly apart, playing their roles perfectly. I watched as he raised his glass in my direction, that familiar smile in place. To my beautiful wife, he announced to the gathered crowd. Happy birthday, darling. I smiled back, raising my fresh glass of champagne. Let them think they had the upper hand. Let them believe their plan was flawless. Because while they were plotting my humiliation, they'd given me something invaluable. The element of surprise. The party continued around me, but everything had changed. Each laugh felt hollow, each congratulation tainted. But beneath the pain and betrayal, something else was growing. Determination. Marcus thought he'd written the perfect ending to our marriage. He was about to learn that this was just the beginning. And I would write the final chapter. The last guest left just before midnight, leaving behind empty champagne flutes and the lingering scent of roses that now felt sickeningly sweet. I watched through the window as Marcus walked Sarah to her car, their bodies maintaining a careful distance, a performance for any watching eyes. My fingers tightened around the crystal glass in my hand as he leaned in, presumably to open her door, their faces close enough for a whispered exchange. Don't break that, Diana said softly, gently prying the glass from my grip. We need you thinking clearly right now. She was right. The fury coursing through my veins wouldn't help. Me. I needed precision, calculation, the same skills I'd used building my own interior design firm from the ground up while Marcus climbed the ranks at Harrison and Palmer Law. Michael's on his way, Diana continued, setting the glass aside. He said to secure any financial documents you can find without raising suspicion. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, anything that might show where Marcus has been hiding money. I nodded, my mind already cataloging the possible locations. His study has a safe behind the Monet print. He thinks I don't know the combination, but I saw him input it last Christmas. The memory stung. I'd been watching him that day to see what he was hiding, thinking it might be my gift. How naive I'd been. The front door opened, and Marcus's footsteps echoed through the foyer. Diana squeezed my hand. Remember, let him think he's in control. We need time to build our case. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his tie loosened, that practiced smile still in place. Wonderful party, darling, though you must be exhausted. Why don't you head up to bed? I have a few case files to review. Case files. Is that what he called the divorce papers now? I forced a smile. Years of hosting law firm dinners making it feel almost natural. Of course. Don't work too late. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Diana gathered her things, playing her part perfectly. Thanks for a lovely evening. Lunch. Tomorrow? Her tone was casual, but her eyes conveyed the urgency. We had work to do. Perfect, I replied. That new place on Beacon Street? Once Diana left, I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, our shared space of 15 years that now felt like a stranger's room. How many nights had he lain beside me, planning my downfall? How many mornings had he kissed me goodbye before meeting Sarah? I heard his study door close, followed by the muffled sound of his voice. Probably calling Sarah, unable to wait even an hour before speaking to her again. I changed into silk pajamas, an anniversary gift from Marcus that I now wanted to burn, and pretended to settle into bed. 2 hours later, his footsteps moved from his study to the guest room. He didn't even try to hide it anymore. His excuse of late-night work, wearing thin months ago. The guest room had gradually accumulated. His things, a spare toothbrush, pajamas, his favorite robe. Another sign I'd chosen to ignore. Once I was certain he was asleep, I slipped out of bed. The house creaked familiarly beneath my feet as I made my way to his study. The Monet print swung aside silently. I'd oiled the hinges last week under the guise of spring cleaning, revealing the wall safe. 6/22/19, our wedding date. The irony wasn't lost on me as the safe clicked open. Inside, organized with his typical precision, lay folders of documents. My hands trembled as I used my phone to photograph each page, careful to return them exactly, as I'd found them. Bank statements showing large transfers to accounts I'd never seen. Property deeds for a beachfront condo in Martha's Vineyard purchased 6 months ago. And there, at the bottom, a manila envelope containing a copy of the divorce papers he planned to serve me. I photographed everything, my lawyer's daughter instincts kicking in about maintaining evidence. As I reached to replace the last folder, something caught my eye. A small velvet jewelry box tucked in the back corner. Inside lay a platinum necklace I'd never seen, the price tag still attached. An early birthday gift for Sarah, no doubt. The sound of a door opening somewhere in the house sent me into action. Everything back in place, safe closed, painting straightened. I was halfway to the door when Marcus's voice froze me in place. Trouble sleeping, darling? He stood in the doorway, wearing the monogrammed robe I'd given him last Christmas. His expression was curious, but I caught the flash of concern in his eyes. Good. Let him worry. I was looking for aspirin, I said, gesturing to my head. Too much champagne, I suppose. In my study? I forced a sheepish laugh. Force of habit. I forgot you moved it to the guest bath. A pointed comment that made him shift uncomfortably. Right. Well, try to get some rest. Big day at the firm tomorrow. I slipped past him, feeling his eyes on my back. In our bedroom, I finally allowed myself to breathe. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, weighted with evidence of his betrayal. I sent a quick text to Diana. Documents secured. Meet earlier? Her response was immediate. 7 a.m. Michael's bringing a friend, a divorce attorney who owes him a favor. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, my mind racing through 15 years of memories, re-examining each one for signs I'd missed. The late-night calls he'd step out to take. The business trips that seemed to multiply after Sarah joined the firm. The way he'd grown, protective of his phone, angling it away when messages arrived. Around dawn, I heard him leave for his morning run, another recent habit that coincided with Sarah's early morning yoga sessions at the park near our house. How many of their plans had been made during those innocent-seeming exercise routines? I dressed carefully, selecting a cream silk blouse and charcoal pencil skirt that projected confidence and control. In the kitchen, I went through the motions of my morning routine, brewing coffee I wouldn't drink, setting out his preferred breakfast dishes. The security camera I'd installed last week, another home improvement project, would show I'd maintained our normal schedule. Diana was already waiting when I arrived at the cafe, Michael beside her with a man I didn't recognize. "Elizabeth," Diana said, standing to hug me. "This is James Patterson, best divorce attorney in Massachusetts." James's handshake was firm, his expression serious. "Michael filled me in. You did well documenting everything last night, but we need to move fast. Men like Marcus, they always have contingency plans. Tell them what you found," Michael urged, sliding a coffee toward me. For the next hour, I laid out everything: the hidden accounts, the property deeds, the carefully orchestrated plan to blindside me at my own birthday party. With each detail, James's expression grew darker. "Classic signs of premeditated financial concealment," Michael said, reviewing the photos on my phone. "The timing of the transfers, the property purchases through shell corporations. He's been planning this for at least a year." "What do we do?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. James leaned forward, his voice low. "First, we protect your assets. Then we gather more evidence. And finally," he smiled grimly, "we show Marcus exactly why you don't underestimate a woman who's built her own empire." As we outlined our strategy, my phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Dinner tonight, to continue celebrating your birthday." I showed the message to James, who nodded approvingly. "Perfect. Keep him thinking everything's normal. Meanwhile, we're going to turn his perfect plan into his worst nightmare." Looking at the small group assembled around me, Diana's fierce loyalty, Michael's analytical brilliance, James's strategic mind, I felt something I hadn't experienced since overhearing Marcus and Sarah in the study: hope. Marcus thought he'd orchestrated the perfect betrayal, but he'd forgotten one crucial detail about me. I wasn't just his wife of 15 years. I was the woman who'd built a successful business from nothing, who'd navigated the cutthroat world of luxury design, who'd learned to read people as well as I read blueprints, and I was just getting started. The next morning, I sat in James Patterson's corner office on the 20th floor of a downtown high-rise, watching as he and Michael pored over the documents I'd photographed. The city skyline stretched out behind them, a stark contrast to the intimate betrayal we were dissecting. "Look at this," Michael said, pointing to a series of transactions. "Regular transfers every third Friday, starting 8 months ago. Always. $9,000, just under the reporting threshold. Classic evasion tactic." James nodded, his expression grim. "And all going to an LLC registered in Delaware. Sarah Williams is listed as the sole director." He looked up at me. "When did you say she started working for Marcus?" 8 months and 2 weeks ago, I replied, the timeline suddenly crystallizing. He hired her right after his longtime secretary. Margaret retired. Another piece clicked into place. Margaret, she tried to warn me, said I should pay attention to the new hire. I thought she was just being protective. Diana, who had taken the morning off from her gallery to support me, squeezed my hand. "You couldn't have known, Liz. None of us saw this coming. But I should have." The signs were there. Margaret's warning, the sudden changes in Marcus's behavior, the way Sarah seemed to know details about our home she shouldn't have known, like how she'd mentioned our wine cellar's organization system during that first dinner party we'd hosted after she was hired. "There's more," Michael continued, pulling up another document. "The Martha's Vineyard property. It was purchased through a different LLC, but the funding came from an account in the Cayman Islands. An account opened with money transferred from your joint savings." The room spun slightly. Our joint savings, where we'd been storing money for our retirement dreams. Dreams that now felt like cruel jokes. How much? I managed to ask. 2.3 million, Michael said quietly. Almost exactly half of what was in the account. James scribbled something in his notepad. He's being careful, I'll give him that. Taking only half suggests he's trying to stay within legal bounds while hiding the transaction itself. What about the law firm? Diana asked. Could they be involved? I shook my head. Harrison and Palmer is too respected to risk their reputation. But a memory surfaced. There's a junior partner, David Reynolds. He and Marcus are close. I've seen them having lunch with Sarah several times. David Reynolds, James repeated, typing the name into his computer. Interesting. He specializes in offshore asset management. We should look into any connections between him and these LLCs. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Of course he was. Sarah had yoga on Tuesdays, which meant their routine evening meetup would follow. Good, James said, surprising me. That gives us time. Elizabeth, I need you to go back to your office and act completely normal. Meanwhile, we're going to set up surveillance on both Marcus and Sarah. I know someone, Michael added. Former FBI, now private investigator. She's discreet and thorough. Diana stood up, straightening her blazer. I'll drive you to your office. Liz, we can't have your car parked here all day if we're maintaining appearances. As we rode the elevator down, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. I looked composed, professional, exactly as I needed to appear. But inside, questions tumbled through my mind. How many other secrets would we uncover? How deep did Marcus's betrayal go? Stop, Diana said gently. I know that look. You're spiraling into the what-ifs. Stay focused on what we can prove, what we can act on. She was right. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I need to call my assistant Rachel. If Marcus checks the office calendar, everything needs to look routine. Back at Elizabeth Shaw Interiors, I threw myself into work. We had 3 major projects in development: a penthouse renovation, a boutique hotel lobby, and a historic home restoration. My team noticed nothing unusual as I reviewed designs, met with clients, and handled vendor calls. Only Rachel, my assistant of 5 years, sensed something was off. She'd been with me long enough to read my subtle cues. During a quiet moment between meetings, she closed my office door. Is everything okay? She asked. You seem different since the birthday party. I considered her carefully. Rachel wasn't just an assistant. She was an ally who'd helped build this company. More importantly, she handled all my business accounting. If Marcus had tampered with any of the company's accounts, she might have noticed. Close the blinds, I said, making a decision, and pull up all our banking records from the past year. Rachel's eyes widened, but she complied without question. For the next hour, we combed through every transaction, every account balance. Everything looked normal until... Wait, Rachel said, pointing to a series of entries. These wire transfers? To our Italian suppliers? Something's not right. I leaned closer. We regularly transferred large sums to Italian artisans for custom pieces, but these amounts seemed inflated. Pull up the original invoices. Rachel dug through our files, spreading papers across my desk. Look at this. The actual invoices are for less than what was transferred. The difference was diverted somewhere else, I finished, my stomach churning. Marcus had access to the company accounts as my husband and legal counsel. He'd been skimming from my own business, probably counting on me trusting him too much. To check the details, I photographed everything, sending the images to James and Michael. Within minutes, Michael replied, "This is exactly what we needed. Clear evidence of financial misconduct using your company's accounts." James's message followed. "Don't confront him yet. We're building a case that will leave him no wiggle room." Rachel watched me, concern etched on her face. What do you need me to do? For now, nothing obvious. But I need you to flag any unusual transactions, especially international transfers. And Rachel. I met her eyes. This stays between us. She nodded. Firmly. Of course. You built this company from nothing, Elizabeth. I won't let anyone threaten that. By late afternoon, Michael's investigator had already made progress. Diana forwarded me photos showing Marcus and Sarah leaving a real estate office in Back Bay. Not his usual territory. His firm's offices were downtown. The agent they met with specializes in luxury condos, Michael's message explained. Same real estate group that handled the Martha's Vineyard property. They were house hunting, planning their future while dismantling mine. The thought should have devastated me, but instead, it hardened my resolve. I worked late, knowing Marcus wouldn't be home anyway. In the quiet of my office, surrounded by the designs and plans that represented years of hard work, I began my own investigation. Every joint account, every shared investment, every property decision, I documented it all. Around 8, Diana brought dinner and news. The PI followed them to a restaurant in the South End. Very cozy, very intimate. She got photos and audio. I forced myself to eat while Diana played the recording. Marcus's voice, warm and intimate in a way it hadn't been with me for months, discussing their future plans. Sarah's laughter, followed by discussion of the divorce timeline. After, the Anderson case wraps up, Marcus was saying. The publicity from winning will overshadow any gossip about the divorce. Plus, the bonus will help with the new place. The Anderson case, his biggest of the year, defending a prominent businessman accused of fraud. The irony wasn't lost on me. Send everything to James, I said, pushing away my barely touched dinner. And I need you to do something else for me. Something Marcus would never expect. Diana raised an eyebrow. What? Call your friend at the Boston Globe. The one who writes the society column. A plan was forming, one that would use Marcus's own strategy against him. I think it's time to ensure our divorce gets exactly the right kind of attention. As Diana made the call, I stared out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Marcus and Sarah were planning their happy ending. But they'd forgotten something. Crucial, every good story needs a plot twist, and I was about to deliver one they'd never see coming. The Boston Globe Society columnist Vivian Parker met me for coffee at an obscure cafe in Brookline, far from Marcus's usual haunts. Diana's connection had paid off. Vivian was intrigued by the possibility of an exclusive story about one of Boston's most prominent attorneys. So, Vivian said, stirring her latte, you want me to hold this information until exactly the right moment? Her shrewd eyes studied me over her vintage cat-eye glasses. Yes, I replied, sliding across a folder of carefully selected documents. These show the timeline of their relationship, the property purchases, the financial transfers. But there's more coming. When the Anderson case concludes next month, that's when you want this to break, Vivian finished, thumbing through the papers. Right when he's expecting to bask in the publicity of winning his biggest case? She smiled appreciatively. Deliciously strategic. But why tell me now? Because I need you to start laying the groundwork. Small mentions of their professional relationship, innocent coverage of their public appearances, make them feel secure, watched but safe. Vivian's smile widened. Make them think they're controlling the narrative. Exactly. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from Michael's PI. More photos of Marcus and Sarah, this time entering a private viewing at an exclusive jewelry store on Newberry Street. The same one where he'd bought my engagement ring 15 years ago. Look at this, I said, showing Vivian the photos. They're not even trying to hide anymore. They think they're untouchable. Men like Marcus always do, Vivian replied, her tone knowing. I've covered enough high-profile divorces to recognize the pattern. They think their power makes them invisible. After Vivian left, I met with James and Michael at their temporary command center, a private office they'd rented under Michael's consulting firm's name. The walls were covered with timelines, financial charts, and surveillance photos. 6. Weeks of investigation had revealed a betrayal far deeper than I'd initially imagined. The jewelry store visit confirms it, Michael said, pinning up the latest photos. He's liquidating assets through luxury purchases, harder to trace than direct transfers. James nodded, adding another note to his growing file. Classic strategy. The jewelry becomes gifts that can be sold later for cash. But he made a mistake. He held up a document. The store requires insurance registration for major purchases. We can subpoena those records. Diana burst in, waving her tablet. You need to see this. Sarah just updated her private Instagram account. The photo showed a delicate hand, Sarah's, resting on a restaurant table, a distinctive ring glinting on her finger. The caption was cryptic. New beginnings coming soon. The location tag showed an upscale restaurant in Providence, 2 hours from Boston. They're getting sloppy, James observed. Too confident. This helps us establish a pattern of ongoing relationship. There's more, Diana continued, scrolling through her tablet. I had my gallery assistant do some digging. Sarah's not just Marcus's secretary. She used to work for David Reynolds, the junior partner. The pieces clicked together. That's how they met, I said, standing to pace the room. David must have introduced them, knowing Marcus was looking for a new secretary when Margaret retired. Michael was already typing on his laptop. David Reynolds. Let me check something. His fingers flew over the keyboard. Got it. He's listed as a director on one of the LLCs that received money from Marcus's hidden accounts. They're all in it together, I realized. David helped set up the offshore accounts, introduced Marcus to Sarah, probably helped plan the whole thing. James was making notes rapidly. This is good. The more people involved, the more likely someone will crack under pressure. We should... He was interrupted by my phone ringing. Marcus's face appeared on the screen. I held up a hand for silence and answered, keeping my voice casual. Hi, honey. Elizabeth? Marcus's voice was warm, practiced. I was thinking about our anniversary next month. What if we took a trip? Just the two of us? My heart pounded. Our anniversary was 3 weeks after the Anderson case concluded, when he was planning to serve the divorce papers. He wanted to take me away to do it privately, minimize the public scandal. That sounds wonderful, I replied, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. Where were you thinking? The Maldives? Like our honeymoon? The same place he'd promised we'd return to for our 15th anniversary. Now I understood. He wanted to recreate our happiest memory before destroying it all. Perfect, I said. Should I call our travel agent? No need. I'll have Sarah handle all the arrangements. Of course he would. I ended the call and turned to the others, my hands shaking with rage. He's planning to serve me the divorce papers during our anniversary trip to the Maldives. Diana swore under her breath. James, however, looked thoughtful. This could work. In our favor. If he's focusing on the anniversary plan, he'll be distracted from what we're doing. Which is exactly what we need, Michael added, pulling up another document. Because look what I found in the LLC paperwork. Sarah's not just listed as a director. She's been receiving a salary from one of Marcus's clients' companies for the past year. I moved closer to see the screen. The company name was familiar, Brunswick Industries, one of Marcus's biggest clients. Why would they be paying her? They wouldn't, James said grimly. Unless Marcus arranged it as part of his legal fees, which means he's been billing clients for her salary while she's supposedly working as his secretary, I finished. That's fraud. And not just against you, James confirmed. Against his firm and his clients. This is the kind of thing that gets attorneys disbarred. The implications were staggering. Marcus hadn't just betrayed me. He'd compromised his entire career, his professional ethics, everything he'd spent decades building. Rachel called as we were processing this latest revelation. "Elizabeth, there's something else. I've been going through old records, and I found something strange. Remember that charity gala Marcus helped organize last year? The Children's Hospital fundraiser? What about it? The donations that were supposed to go through our company account as sponsorship? They never reached the hospital. They were redirected to another account first. My blood ran cold. Marcus had handled all the legal aspects of my company's charitable giving. How much? $500,000. Rachel's voice was tight with anger. I've got the paper trail. He used our company's reputation to legitimize the transfers, then diverted the funds. I shared this new information with the others. James immediately grasped the significance. This is perfect. Charitable fraud is toxic for an attorney's reputation. No jury would be sympathetic. We need to move carefully, Michael cautioned. Start gathering sworn statements from everyone involved. Rachel, the hospital administrators, the bank officers who handled the transfers. Diana was already making calls, her gallery assistant researching more connections between Sarah, David Reynolds, and Marcus's other clients. As the evidence mounted, a clear picture emerged. Marcus hadn't just planned to divorce me. He'd orchestrated a years-long conspiracy involving multiple parties, using my business, his firm's resources, and even charitable donations to fund his new life with Sarah. The Anderson case concludes in 3 weeks, James said, reviewing our timeline. Then, he plans to take you to the Maldives 2 weeks after that. We need to be ready before then. I stared at the wall of evidence, each photo and document representing another layer of betrayal. Marcus thought he was playing a sophisticated game, but he'd forgotten something crucial about me. I'd spent 15 years watching him work, learning how he thought, understanding his strategies, and now I was going to use everything he'd taught me to destroy everything he'd built. Call Vivian, I told Diana. Tell her to start dropping those breadcrumbs in her column. Let's make Marcus and Sarah feel secure in their perfect plan. As Diana made the call, I added one final note to our timeline. Anniversary trip, Maldives. But unlike Marcus's version, this wouldn't be an ending. It would be my beginning. Vivian's first article appeared in the Boston Globe's Society pages. 3 days later, a seemingly innocent piece about power couples in Boston's legal world. Marcus and I were featured prominently, with a subtle mention of his dedicated new secretary, who had helped streamline his prestigious practice. The photo showed us at my birthday party, Marcus's arm around my waist, Sarah visible in the D background. Perfect, James said, reading the article in his office. Establishing the background while hiding the knife. I studied the photo, remembering the moment it was taken. Just minutes after I'd overheard them in the study, all of us playing our parts perfectly. Marcus called me this morning, I said. He's already booked the Maldives trip, through Sarah, of course. Of course, Diana muttered from her position, by the window. Because every husband has his secretary book his anniversary trip. Michael entered, carrying a thick folder. Speaking of Sarah, you won't believe what we found. He spread documents across James's desk. She's been busy. 3 new bank accounts opened in the past month, all under different variations of her name. Sarah Williams, Sarah W. Bennett, S. Whitney Bennett. Bennett, I asked, the name triggering something in my memory. Her mother's maiden name, Michael confirmed. She's establishing alternate identities. Classic preparation for moving money, quietly. James picked up one of the documents. These accounts, they're all at banks where Brunswick Industries does business. Marcus's client, I remembered. The one paying her hidden salary. Exactly. Michael pulled up more records on his laptop. And look at this. Brunswick Industries just opened a new division in Singapore. Care to guess who's handling the legal work? David Reynolds, I said. the pieces clicking together. They're setting up their escape route. Once the divorce is final, they'll probably transfer Sarah to the Singapore office, with Marcus joining later under the guise of expanding the firm's international presence. Not if we can help it, James replied grimly. These overseas accounts give us leverage. No judge looks kindly on hidden assets, especially when they cross international borders. Diana's phone buzzed. Rachel just sent something interesting. Marcus visited your office yesterday while you were at the site meeting. My head snapped up. What? Security footage shows him accessing your private files. Rachel says he spent almost an hour in your office. James was already reaching for his phone. We need to sweep for devices, if he's planted anything. No. I interrupted, a realization hitting me. He wasn't planting anything. He was looking for evidence that I know. I turned to Michael. Can we use this? The unauthorized access? Definitely. It shows consciousness of guilt, plus potential corporate espionage if he accessed any client files. A knock at the door made us all freeze. James's assistant poked, her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here you need to meet. She stepped aside, revealing an elegant older woman I recognized immediately. Margaret? I stood, shocked to see Marcus's former secretary. What are you doing here? Margaret Reynolds, no relation to David, had been Marcus's secretary for 20 years before her sudden retirement. She closed the door behind her, her expression determined. I've been following Vivian's column, she said, reading between the lines, and it's time you knew the real reason I retired. For the next hour, Margaret revealed a pattern of behavior that made my blood run cold. Marcus and David Reynolds had been planning this for years. Sarah wasn't just a random hire. She'd been carefully selected and groomed for her role. They started positioning her 2 years ago, Margaret explained. David would bring her to firm events, introduce her around. I noticed how she always managed to be wherever Marcus was. Then the documents started disappearing. What documents? James asked sharply. Financial records? Client billing statements? At first, I thought I was just misplacing things. Then I found copies of privileged documents in Sarah's desk, papers she shouldn't have had access to. Did you confront them? I asked. Margaret's laugh was bitter. I tried. That's when the threats started. Subtle at first, comments about my age, about modernizing the firm. Then David Reynolds made it clear, take early retirement with a generous package, or face accusations of incompetence. They forced you out, Diana realized, to make way for Sarah. And to protect their scheme, Margaret added. I have copies of everything I managed to document. Dates, transactions, meetings. I've been waiting for the right moment to come forward. James was already pulling out a legal pad. We need to get your official statement. This establishes a long-term pattern of conspiracy. As Margaret detailed everything she'd witnessed, I remembered all the times she'd tried to warn me in her subtle way. The concerned looks, the careful comments about keeping my own records, her insistence that I maintain separate accounts for my business. There's something else, Margaret said, reaching into her bag. The day before I left, I made copies of Marcus's private calendar, including entries about meetings with Sarah going back 18 months before I retired. Michael whistled softly as he reviewed the calendar. This is gold, shows premeditation, directly contradicts any claim that the relationship started after she was hired. Why didn't you show me this before? I asked Margaret softly. She met my eyes. Would you have believed it then? Sometimes we need to discover the truth in our own time, when we're ready to see it. She was right. Even if she'd shown me proof months ago, I probably would have found ways to explain it away. I needed to catch them in the act myself to finally accept the truth. Diana's phone buzzed again. Another update from the PI, Marcus. And Sarah just had lunch with David Reynolds at that new place on the waterfront. They looked celebratory. The Anderson case, James said. The trial starts next week. They must be confident about winning. I stood, moving to the window. Below, Boston's financial district hummed with activity, oblivious to the drama unfolding in this office. They think everything's falling into place. The case will end in triumph, the divorce will be handled quietly during the Maldives trip, and they'll start their new life with no one the wiser. Speaking of the Anderson case, Michael interjected, I found something interesting in those Brunswick Industries records. There's a connection to Anderson's company, a series of transactions that look unusual. James leaned forward. What kind of connection? The kind that suggests Marcus might be using privileged information from one client to benefit another. If this is what I think it is, it's not just fraud, I finished. It's legal malpractice. Margaret nodded slowly. That fits with patterns I noticed. Marcus and David were always very careful about keeping certain client files separate from the main system. The implications were staggering. Marcus hadn't just betrayed me. He'd potentially compromised multiple client relationships, violated legal ethics, and exposed his firm to massive liability. We need to move carefully, James cautioned. This is bigger than a divorce case now. We're talking potential criminal charges. Good, I said, my voice hard. Let's use everything. While they're focused on the Anderson case and planning their perfect getaway, we'll be building a trap they can't escape. Diana squeezed my hand. What's our next move? I looked at the team. Assembled around me, James with his legal expertise, Michael with his financial acumen, Diana with her unwavering support, Margaret with her damning evidence, and Rachel still digging through company records. We let them play out their hand, I decided. Let Marcus win his case. Let him think everything's going according to plan. Meanwhile, we document everything, build our case, and prepare for the moment when... When? Diana prompted. When I serve him divorce papers, I smiled grimly, at the exact moment he plans to serve me. In the Maldives, in front of everyone who matters in his world. The room fell silent as they absorbed the audacity of the plan. Finally, James nodded, approvingly. Poetic justice, but we'll need to time everything perfectly. Leave that to me, Margaret said. I still have friends at the firm. I can help coordinate the timing. As we began plotting out the details, I felt a strange sense of calm. Marcus had spent years crafting his betrayal, thinking he was the master strategist, but he'd forgotten something crucial. He wasn't the only one who knew how to play the long game, and my game was just beginning. The Anderson trial's opening day arrived with the kind of media coverage Marcus had always craved. Local news stations clustered outside the courthouse, their cameras trained on my husband as he strode up the steps, projecting confidence in his bespoke Italian suit. Sarah walked 2 careful steps behind him, carrying his briefcase and looking every bit the devoted secretary. I watched the coverage from James's office, noting how Sarah's designer outfit probably cost more than a month's legitimate salary. Ready? James asked, straightening his tie. Absolutely. I smoothed down my own suit, a power outfit I'd chosen specifically for today. Margaret's contact confirmed everything's in place? Yes. Your name's on the witness list as a character witness for the defense. Marcus has no idea we added it last minute. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus had been so focused on the complex financial evidence in the Anderson case, he hadn't bothered to review the final witness list thoroughly. Why would he? His wife had no connection to the case, or so he thought. Diana met us at the courthouse, Michael beside her with a briefcase full of documents. Sarah just went in, she reported. She looked nervous. She should be, Michael replied grimly. Wait until she sees what's coming. We entered the courtroom just as the proceedings were about to begin. Marcus was at the defense table, his head bent close to Anderson's as they whispered urgently. He didn't notice us sitting in the gallery, another miscalculation on his part. The prosecution's opening statement was detailed and damning, laying out evidence of Anderson's alleged financial fraud. Throughout it all, Marcus maintained his composed demeanor, occasionally making notes or whispering to his client. Sarah sat directly behind him, her face a mask of professional attention. Then Marcus stood for his opening statement. This was his element, commanding the room, weaving narratives that made juries lean forward in their seats. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying that practiced sincerity, "what we have here is not a case of fraud, but of complex business practices being misunderstood." I watched him work his magic, remembering all the times I'd seen him practice these performances in our home office. How many of those late nights had actually been spent with Sarah, rehearsing more than just legal strategy? The morning proceeded with the prosecution's first witnesses. During a brief recess, I saw Marcus finally notice our presence. His step faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly, approaching our group with that perfect smile. "Elizabeth, darling," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek, "I didn't expect to see you here. And James, what brings you to criminal court?" "Professional interest," James replied smoothly. "Fascinating case." Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, but before he could respond, Sarah appeared at his elbow. "Mr. Walker, the prosecution just filed some additional exhibits. We need to review them before the afternoon session." I watched them retreat to a conference room, noting how their bodies angled toward each other automatically. They thought they were being subtle. They had no idea how obvious their connection had become once. "You knew to look for it. All set?" Michael murmured, checking his phone. I nodded. The prosecution was about to rest their case, setting up the defense's presentation, setting up our trap. The afternoon session began with Marcus calling his first witness, a financial expert who would testify about the legitimacy of Anderson's business practices. As the testimony dragged on, I could see some jurors struggling to stay engaged through the technical details. Then the judge announced, "The defense calls Elizabeth Walker to the stand." The reaction was immediate. Marcus's head snapped up from his notes, his face showing genuine shock for the first time I could remember. Sarah dropped her pen, scrambling to retrieve it as I walked confidently to the witness stand. After I was sworn in, Marcus approached, struggling to maintain his composure. "Mrs. Walker," he began, his voice carefully modulated, "could you please state your relationship to the defendant?" "Certainly," I smiled. "Besides being your wife, I'm also one of Mr. Anderson's business partners." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Marcus froze, his practiced poise cracking. "I don't understand." Through my interior design firm, I continued pleasantly. "We've been handling all the renovations for Anderson Properties' luxury developments. In fact, I have quite detailed records of our business relationship." Marcus's face had gone pale. He knew what was coming. All those transactions he'd hidden, all the money he'd diverted through my company's accounts. It was all about to come to light. "Your Honor," he stammered, "I request a brief recess." "Denied," the judge replied. "Please continue with your witness, Mr. Walker." For the next 30 minutes, I led Marcus through a carefully choreographed dance. Every question he asked opened another door he didn't want opened. Every attempt to redirect only made things worse. Through it all, I maintained a pleasant, helpful demeanor, just a witness doing my civic duty. "And these financial records," I said, gesturing to the documents James had ready, "show a pattern of transactions that might be relevant to the case." Marcus was sweating now, his perfect composure shattered. In the gallery, Sarah sat rigid with tension, her knuckles white around her notebook. She could see it too, their careful plans beginning to unravel. No further questions. Marcus finally managed, retreating to the defense table. The prosecutor rose, a predatory gleam in her eye. She'd been briefed about what was coming. "Mrs. Walker, could you elaborate on these financial records?" "Objection." Marcus shot to his feet. "These records weren't part of discovery." "Actually," The prosecutor smiled. They were submitted last week. Perhaps you missed them in your review. For the next hour, I walked the jury through a complex web of transactions, all legitimate on the surface, but revealing something very different when examined closely. By the time I stepped down from the witness stand, the jury was fully engaged, several of them taking detailed notes. During the next recess, I watched Marcus and Sarah huddled with Anderson in a corner, their urgent whispers carrying an edge of panic. David Reynolds had appeared as well, his face dark with concern as they showed him documents on Sarah's tablet. Phase 1 accomplished, James said quietly as we left the courthouse. They know they're vulnerable now, but they don't yet realize how much we know. Diana was practically bouncing with satisfaction. Did you see Sarah's face when you mentioned the overseas transactions? I thought she was going to faint. Marcus will try to damage control, Michael warned. He'll want to know how much you've discovered, how long you've been investigating. Let him wonder, I replied, feeling truly confident for the first time in weeks. While he's scrambling to cover his tracks here, he won't see what's coming next. Back at James's office, we reviewed the day's events. Margaret had been right. Marcus had been using privileged information from multiple clients to orchestrate his financial schemes. Today's testimony had exposed just enough to make him nervous, while holding back our biggest revelations for later. Anderson's going to start asking questions, James predicted. About where his money's really been going, about why his lawyer's wife seems to know so much about his finances. And the prosecutor? I asked, already requesting additional banking records. Once she starts pulling those threads? My phone buzzed, a message from Marcus. We need to talk about what happened today. I showed it to the others. Diana snorted. He's probably trying to figure out how to spin this, make you look like you're confused about the transactions. Let him try, I replied, deleting the message without responding. The evidence speaks for itself. As we prepared to leave for the day, Margaret called with an update from her sources at the firm. The partners are asking questions, she reported, especially about David Reynolds' involvement with Anderson's accounts. They're planning an internal audit. Everything was falling into place. The first cracks had appeared in Marcus's perfect facade, and they would only grow larger. He'd spent years building his house of cards, thinking he was untouchable. Today, we'd pulled out the first card. Soon, the whole thing would come crashing down. I arrived home to find Marcus waiting in the kitchen, his tie loosened, a glass of scotch in his hand. Want to tell me what that was about today? He asked, trying to sound casual. Just doing my civic duty, I replied innocently. After all, you always say everyone should tell the truth in court. His eyes narrowed slightly. Some of those records you mentioned, where did you get them? Oh, you know me, I smiled, heading upstairs. I like to keep good business records, for tax purposes. Let him stew on that, I thought as I closed our bedroom door. Let him wonder what else I might have documented, what else I might know. The Maldives trip was 3 weeks away. By then, we'd have everything in place for the final act of this drama. Marcus thought today was just an unfortunate surprise. He had no idea it was just the beginning. As I got ready for bed, I heard him on the phone in his study, his voice carrying an edge of urgency I'd never heard before. Phase 1 had accomplished exactly what we'd hoped, the first victory in what would become a war, and I was just getting started. The morning after my courtroom testimony, Boston's legal community was buzzing with speculation. Vivian's latest column, strategically placed in the Globe's business section, raised subtle questions about the connections between Anderson's case and several other high-profile clients represented by Harrison and Palmer. I sat in my office at Elizabeth Shaw Interiors, watching the dominoes begin to fall. Rachel had just forwarded an email from one of the firm's senior partners requesting a meeting to discuss our ongoing business relationship. They were getting nervous. Mrs. Walker? My intercom buzzed. There's a Mr. Anderson here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. I exchanged glances with Diana, who had been reviewing our latest evidence. This was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Send him in. Robert Anderson strode into my office, looking considerably less polished than he had in court yesterday. His designer suit was slightly rumpled, his face bearing the shadows of a sleepless night. "Mrs. Walker," he said, declining my offer to sit. "I think we need to have a frank discussion about what's really going on." "Of course," I replied, gesturing for Diana to stay as she moved to leave. "What would you like to discuss?" Anderson paced, agitation clear in every movement. "Those transactions you mentioned in court yesterday. The ones involving my properties and your design firm. I've been up all night reviewing them with my private accountant. And they don't match our official records." He stopped pacing, fixing me with an intense stare. "There are discrepancies, large ones. Money that was supposed to go to renovations but seems to have disappeared." I opened my laptop, turning it to show him a spreadsheet Rachel had prepared. "You mean transactions? Like these?" His face paled as he scanned the numbers. "These are different from what Marcus showed me. He said all the extra costs were for premium materials, custom orders from Italy." "Some were," I acknowledged, "but not all. Notice the routing numbers on these transfers?" Anderson leaned closer, his banking background evident in the way he quickly grasped the implications. "These went through shell companies before reaching your vendors. But why would Marcus—" He trailed off, realization dawning. "He's been skimming from the transactions." "Not just from yours," I added quietly. "We've found similar patterns with other clients." Anderson sank into a chair, his composure finally cracking. "The SEC has been investigating my companies for months. Marcus promised he could handle it, said he had everything under control. But if these transactions come to light, they already have." I handed him a copy of the latest court filings. "The prosecutor's office submitted subpoenas this morning for all related banking records." "I'll be ruined," Anderson whispered. Then his head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "Unless you're showing me this for a reason. What do you want?" "The truth," I replied simply. "About everything. Marcus's involvement, David Reynolds's role, all of it. In exchange, my evidence might help show you were also a victim of fraud." Anderson was silent for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he reached for his phone. "I need to make some calls, starting with the DA's office." After he left, Diana let out a low whistle. That was unexpected. "Think he'll really turn on Marcus?" "He has to," I replied. "It's his only play now. Better to be seen as a victim than a conspirator." My phone buzzed, a message from Marcus. "We need to talk about Anderson, coming to your office." Diana raised an eyebrow. "Perfect timing. Want me to stay?" "No, but have Michael ready with the recording equipment. Every conversation counts." Now. 20 minutes later, Marcus arrived, looking immaculate as always, but with tension visible around his eyes. Sarah wasn't with him. Interesting. "Elizabeth," he began, closing my office door. "About yesterday." "About the evidence of financial fraud?" I interrupted pleasantly. "Or about how your client just left my office with proof that you've been manipulating his accounts?" Marcus froze for a split second before recovering. "There seems to be some confusion about those transactions. If you'll let me explain." "Explain? What?" "How you used my company to launder money. How you and David Reynolds set up fake vendor accounts to siphon funds. Or maybe you'd like to explain Sarah's role in all this." "Sarah?" His laugh was forced. "She's just my secretary. She processes paperwork, nothing more." "Really?" I turned my monitor to show him a document. "Then why is she listed as director on 3 companies that received diverted funds? Companies registered to the same address as your beach house in Martha's Vineyard?" The color drained from his face. How did you get access to these records? I smiled. Let's just say Margaret was very thorough in her documentation before she retired. Marcus sank into a chair, his perfect posture crumbling. Elizabeth, whatever you think you know, I know everything, Marcus. Every transaction, every secret meeting, every plan you and Sarah made, including your plans for our anniversary trip. His head snapped up. The Maldives? Did you really think serving me divorcee papers on the beach where we honeymooned was clever? Or was that Sarah's idea of poetic justice? Before he could respond, my intercom buzzed again. Mrs. Walker? There are some gentlemen here from the SEC. They have a warrant. Marcus stood so quickly he knocked over his chair. I pressed the intercom. Button. Send them in. Elizabeth, he said urgently. Whatever you're doing, think carefully. We can work something out. Like you worked things out with Anderson, with Brunswick Industries, with the Children's Hospital charity funds. The door opened to reveal two serious-looking men in dark suits. Marcus Walker? One asked, though it clearly wasn't a question. We need you to come with us. We have some questions about certain financial transactions. As they led Marcus out, I saw Sarah rushing down the hallway, panic clear on her face. She stopped short at the sight of the SEC agents, her designer handbag slipping from nerveless fingers. My phone lit up with messages. James. DA's office got Anderson's statement. They're moving on David Reynolds next. Michael. Brunswick. Industries Board just called an emergency meeting. Diana. Vivian's story about the charity funds just went live. Rachel. The firm's partners are here. They want to see all our records. Everything was unraveling faster than even we had planned. Marcus's carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing, taking Sarah and David Reynolds down with it. I stepped into the hallway where Sarah stood frozen, watching Marcus being escorted to the elevator. You should call a lawyer, I told her quietly. A good one. You'll need it. She turned to me, her composure finally breaking. You don't understand. We never meant to get caught, I finished. That's the thing about secrets, Sarah. They always come out eventually. Back in my office, I called James to update him. Marcus just got picked up by the SEC. Sarah's falling apart. How long until they move on David Reynolds? Already happening, he replied. Margaret's evidence was the key. Once they saw the pattern of client fund manipulation. And the Maldives. Trip? Still on as far as they know. But now we have a new wrinkle. The firm's senior partners want to meet with you tomorrow. They're talking about a full audit of all cases involving your company. I smiled, remembering all the careful documentation Rachel and I had prepared. Perfect. Time to show them exactly how their star attorney has been operating. As the days, events unfolded, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. The life I'd built with Marcus was over, but it had died long before today. What was ending now was the illusion, the carefully maintained facade of perfection. My phone buzzed. One final time. A message from Margaret. Just heard from my contact at the firm. They've suspended Marcus pending investigation. Sarah's been escorted out of the building. The first phase of our plan had succeeded beyond expectations. But we weren't done yet. The Maldives trip was still 2 weeks away, and I had one final card to play. Marcus thought today was devastating. He had no idea what was coming next. The Maldives stretched below our private seaplane like a string of pearls scattered across turquoise velvet. Despite everything that had happened over the past 2 weeks, Marcus had insisted on keeping our anniversary trip. His desperation to maintain appearances had worked perfectly into our plans. Beautiful, isn't it? He said, reaching for my hand. I allowed the contact, noting how his fingers trembled slightly. The confident lawyer was cracking under pressure. The past 14 days had been a carefully orchestrated dance. The SEC investigation had been temporarily sealed at the request of the DA's office, allowing Marcus one last chance to incriminate himself further. Sarah had gone suspiciously quiet, her desk at Harrison and Palmer sitting empty while she supposedly dealt with a family emergency. The resort staff greeted us with flowered leis and coconut drinks, the same way they had 15 years ago during our honeymoon. Marcus played the role of devoted husband perfectly, his hand at the small of my back as we were escorted to our overwater villa. Just like before, he smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. He kept checking his phone, though the resort's remote location meant limited service. Was he trying to reach Sarah? Or was he worried about the mounting evidence back in Boston? "I have a surprise for dinner," he said as we unpacked. "I've arranged something special at the private beach." Of course he had. The same beach where he'd proposed 15 years ago. The perfect setting for serving divorce papers. "That sounds lovely," I replied. "I have a surprise for you, too." His smile faltered slightly. "Oh? But it can wait until dinner." I spent the afternoon by our private pool, watching Marcus pace, on our villa's deck, making repeated attempts to call someone despite the spotty connection. Each failed call seemed to increase his agitation. Finally, as the sun began to set, we made our way to the beach. The resort had outdone themselves. Torches lined a path to a private dining setup, roses and candles scattered across crisp white linens. In different circumstances, it would have been romantic. "Wine?" Marcus offered, his hand slightly unsteady as he poured. "Not yet," I smiled. "I'm waiting for our guests." He froze mid-pour. "Guests?" Right on cue, voices carried across the beach. Through the gathering dusk, I saw them approaching, Diana and James, followed by 2 members of the resort's management team and Sarah. Marcus dropped the wine bottle. It hit the sand with a soft thud, red spreading like blood across the pristine white beach. "Sarah?" His voice cracked. "What are you—" "She received the same invitation you sent to the others," I said calmly, though I took the liberty of changing the delivery details. More figures emerged from the growing darkness. David Reynolds, looking considerably less polished than usual. Robert Anderson, flanked by 2 serious-looking men I recognized as FBI agents. And finally Margaret, carrying a familiar-looking briefcase. "What is this?" Marcus demanded, panic edging into his voice. "This," I said standing, "is your perfect moment, Marcus. Isn't this where you plan to serve me with divorce papers? In front of carefully selected witnesses, on the beach where our story began?" He stumbled back a step. "How did you know?" I gestured to Sarah, who looked like she might faint. "You really should be more careful about what you discuss in your study during birthday parties." The FBI agents moved forward, positioning themselves strategically. One of them spoke into a radio, and more lights appeared along the beach as additional agents emerged from their concealed positions. "Marcus Walker," the lead agent announced formally, "we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement. You can't—" Marcus looked wildly around, his perfect facade crumbling completely. "This is a private island. You have no jurisdiction?" "Actually," James stepped forward, "they do. The Maldivian government has been very cooperative, especially given the international nature of your financial crimes." Sarah let out a small sob. "Marcus, they know everything. The accounts, the properties, the client funds." "Shut up!" Marcus snapped, but it was too late. "Mr. Reynolds," the FBI agent continued, "you're also under arrest as a co-conspirator." David Reynolds didn't resist as the second agent approached him. He looked defeated, his usual arrogance replaced by resignation. "The evidence is quite comprehensive," James continued, opening his briefcase. "Bank records, property deeds, client accounts, and of course, the original divorce papers you plan to serve tonight, complete with backdated signatures and falsified financial disclosures." Marcus lunged for the briefcase, but the FBI agents were faster. As they restrained him, I stepped forward, holding up a second set of papers. "Looking for these?" I asked. Don't worry, I brought my own divorce papers. But unlike yours, mine include a complete accounting of all your hidden assets. The color drained from his face as he scanned the documents. Every account, every property, every secret transaction, all meticulously documented. How long? He whispered. How long have you known? Since my birthday party, I replied. When you and Sarah were so busy planning this moment that you didn't notice me standing in the doorway of your study. Sarah crumpled into a beach chair, her designer dress getting covered in sand. I told you we should have been more careful, she said to Marcus. I told you Elizabeth wasn't as naive as you thought. Naive? I laughed softly. No, Sarah. I just trusted my husband, a mistake I won't make again. The FBI agents began reading Marcus his rights. David Reynolds was already being led away, his island vacation cut decidedly short. The firm knows everything, Margaret added, her voice carrying satisfaction. They're cooperating fully with the investigation. Your clients are being notified, as we speak. Marcus struggled against the agents. Elizabeth, please, we can talk about this. Like you were going to talk to me tonight? I held up his original divorce papers. These are quite interesting reading, especially the parts about my supposed financial mismanagement of company funds. Were you really planning to blame everything on me? It wasn't, he started, but I cut him off. Your turn to listen, Marcus. For 15 years, I watched you build your reputation on lies. I helped you entertain clients, supported your career, believed in you. And all the while, you were plotting to destroy me. I loved you. He tried, but the words sounded hollow even to him. No, I replied quietly. You loved what I represented. The successful wife, the perfect hostess, the trusting fool who never questioned your late nights or missing funds. Sarah stood suddenly. He never loved either of us, she said, her voice bitter. We were just convenient pieces in his game. Marcus looked between us, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. The FBI agents began leading him away, his pristine linen suit now wrinkled and sand-covered. Elizabeth, he called back desperately, what about us? 15 years? Are over, I finished. Happy anniversary, Marcus. I watched as they led him away, the torchlight casting dramatic shadows across the beach. Diana came to stand beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. You okay? She asked softly. I looked around at the scene we'd created, the romantic dinner setting now disrupted by federal agents, the scattered rose petals mixing with spilled wine in the sand, the shocked resort staff hovering at a discreet distance. You know what? I said, finally letting myself smile. I really am. As the group dispersed, James approached with the final papers requiring my signature. Ready to end this? I took the pen he offered, my hand steady as I signed my name. Behind us, the ocean whispered secrets to the shore. But for the first time, in months, I had no interest in secrets. Everything was finally in the open, where it belonged. The morning after the beach confrontation, I sat on my villa's deck, watching the sunrise paint the Indian Ocean in shades of gold and rose. Marcus and the others had been escorted off the island last night, leaving me to experience the cruel irony of spending the day after my wedding anniversary in the same place where we'd honeymooned, only this time, alone. Room service, Diana called, emerging from inside with a tray of coffee and fresh fruit. She'd insisted on staying, canceling her flight back to Boston. You should eat something. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since dawn as news of Marcus's arrest hit the Boston media. Vivian's article had broken first, a detailed exposé of the fraud, embezzlement, and betrayal, complete with quotes from former clients and colleagues. Harrison. And Palmer's managing partner called, James said, joining us on the deck. He'd also stayed, handling the legal aftermath. They're holding an emergency board meeting. The scandal's already affecting their stock price. I sipped my coffee, scrolling through the headlines. Prominent Boston attorney arrested in international fraud scheme. High society marriage ends in federal investigation. Law firm partner and secretary in $1 million embezzlement plot. The DA's office is offering Sarah a deal, James continued, accepting a coffee cup from Diana. She's willing to testify against Marcus and David Reynolds in exchange for reduced charges. Of course she is, Diana muttered. Anything to save herself. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Robert Anderson's wife. I had no idea about any of this. Thank you for exposing the truth. We need to talk when you're back. More messages poured in from Marcus's other clients, each discovering the extent of his deception. The carefully constructed network of lies was unraveling at lightning speed. Margaret sent an update, Diana said, checking her own phone. The firm's internal audit is revealing more discrepancies. They've frozen all accounts associated with Marcus and David Reynolds. I stood, walking to the deck's edge. Below, the crystal clear water revealed coral reefs and tropical fish, unchanged by the human drama playing out above them. What about the charity funds? Already being traced, James replied. The Children's Hospital Board is pursuing separate charges. They're determined to recover every penny. Rachel called next, her voice tight with controlled anger. The FBI is here at the office. They need access to all our financial records to document the money trail through the company accounts. Give them everything, I instructed. And Rachel, thank you. For everything. We're family here, she replied simply. No one messes with family. Throughout the day, more details emerged. Marcus's other victims began coming forward. Clients, whose trust funds he'd manipulated, partners he'd deceived, even junior associates he'd pressured into helping cover his tracks. The firm's offering to settle any claims against them related to Marcus's actions, James announced after another call. They're desperate to contain the damage to their reputation. Diana looked up from her tablet. Speaking of reputation, you might want to see this. She showed me a social media post from one of Boston's most prominent society mavens. Always knew there was something off about Marcus Walker. Elizabeth deserves better. Boston strong, hard justice served. Funny how everyone always knew after the fact, I remarked dryly. That's not all, Diana continued scrolling. Sarah's sister is giving interviews, claiming she tried to warn their family about Marcus's manipulation. Says he pressured Sarah into the relationship. Convenient revision of history, James noted. The evidence shows she was a willing participant from the beginning. My phone lit up with another call, this time from Marcus's mother. I let it go to voicemail, not ready for that conversation yet. She'd been like a second mother to me over the years, and her pain would be too real, too raw. The Boston Globe wants an exclusive interview, Diana mentioned carefully. Vivian says you can control the narrative, tell your side of the story. Shook my head. The evidence speaks for itself. I won't give Marcus the satisfaction of turning this into a public soap opera. As evening approached, James received word that Marcus and David Reynolds had been formally charged. The list of federal indictments was staggering. Wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, and more. Sarah faced lesser charges but still significant ones. They're being held without bail, James reported. The prosecutors argued they were flight risks given their international connections and hidden assets. A photo appeared in my newsfeed. Marcus being led into the federal courthouse in Boston, his perfect image shattered. His bespoke suit was wrinkled, his carefully styled hair disheveled. Sarah was in another photo, trying to hide her face, from cameras as she entered with her lawyer. The firm's senior partners are calling again, Diana said. They want to meet as soon as you're back in Boston. Something about ensuring their other clients don't pull their business. They should be worried, James commented. Marcus handled their biggest accounts. This scandal could cost them millions in lost clients. Rachel sent over the latest financial reports. Our company's stock had actually risen as news spread that we had helped expose the fraud. Messages poured in from industry colleagues, clients, and even competitors, all expressing support. Your interior design empire remains untouchable, Diana smiled. If anything, this has shown everyone how strong you really are. As night fell, over the Maldives, we sat on the beach, the same beach where everything had exploded just 24 hours ago. The resort staff had cleared away all evidence of last night's confrontation, but I could still see it playing out in my mind. What happens now? Diana asked softly. Now, I replied, watching the stars emerge over the ocean. We rebuild. But this time, on my terms. My phone buzzed one final time, a message from Margaret. Just heard from my sources at the firm. They're naming you in a press release, praising your courage and integrity in exposing the fraud. Damage control at its finest. I laughed quietly. The same firm that had enabled Marcus's schemes for years was now trying to position themselves as champions of justice. But it didn't matter. The truth was out, and no amount of corporate spin could change that. The DA wants to meet tomorrow when we land, James said. They're building their case for trial. Marcus will try to plea bargain, Diana predicted. He always said every case has a price. Not this one, I replied firmly. Some things can't be bought off or negotiated away. Some betrayals run too deep. As the waves whispered against the shore, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. The past 24 hours had changed everything, but they'd also set me free. Marcus's perfect plan had backfired spectacularly, destroying everything he'd tried to take from me. In the end, he'd orchestrated his own downfall, and I'd simply made sure he had the perfect audience for it. 6 months after the Maldives confrontation, I stood in my newly renovated office at Elizabeth Shaw Interiors, looking out over the Boston skyline. The city had changed, or maybe I was the one who'd changed, viewing everything through different eyes now. The morning's paper sat on my desk, featuring coverage of Marcus's plea deal. He'd finally broken, agreeing to testify against David Reynolds in exchange for a reduced sentence. 15 years of marriage had ended with 15 years in federal prison. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ready for the board meeting? Rachel asked, appearing in my doorway with a stack of reports. Our company had not just survived the scandal. We'd thrived, expanding into 3 new markets and doubling our client base. Almost, I replied, adjusting my blazer. Has the foundation's paperwork been finalized? The Elizabeth Shaw Foundation for Financial Literacy and Empowerment, my way of turning pain into purpose. We'd used part of the recovered funds to establish a program helping women understand and protect their financial interests. All set, Rachel confirmed. The first workshop series starts next month. We already have a waiting list. My phone buzzed, with a message from Diana. Sarah's sentencing is today. Want company for lunch after your meeting? Sarah had cooperated fully once she realized Marcus had planned to blame everything on her. Her testimony had been crucial in unraveling the full extent of the conspiracy. She'd face 5 years, served, at a minimum security facility, a far cry from the luxury lifestyle she'd imagined with Marcus. Mrs. Walker? My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Harrison is here for your meeting. Timothy Harrison, the managing partner of Harrison and Palmer, had been doing damage control for months. The firm had survived barely after implementing sweeping changes and paying substantial settlements to affected clients. Elizabeth, he greeted me, looking older than I remembered. Thank you for seeing me. Timothy, I gestured to a chair. What can I do for you? He placed a thick envelope on my desk. The final settlement papers, and a proposition. The firm's board would like to retain your services as our exclusive interior design contractor. I raised an eyebrow. Interesting timing. We're rebranding, he explained. New offices, new image. Your reputation for integrity would be valuable to us. My reputation for exposing fraud in your firm, you mean? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. We've made mistakes, serious ones, But we're committed to change. I studied him thoughtfully. Send over the proposal. I'll have my team review it. After he left, I opened another email. Photos from the DA's office showing David Reynolds being led away after his conviction yesterday. The man who had helped orchestrate everything had finally faced justice. Margaret had been instrumental in his conviction, her meticulous records providing a paper trail that his expensive legal team couldn't explain away. She'd turned down the firm's attempt to rehire her, choosing instead to work with my foundation. "Your 3 o'clock is here," my assistant announced. "The potential client from New York?" I smiled, remembering the name. Amanda Chen, a prominent developer who had previously worked exclusively with Marcus's clients. Now she was here to see me. Send her in. The meeting went well, ending with a signed contract for 6 new luxury properties. As Amanda left, she paused in the doorway. "You know, I almost hired Marcus as my attorney last year. Dodged a bullet there thanks to you." After she left, I walked through our office space, noting how different everything felt. The walls that had once displayed my wedding photos now showcased our company's achievements and foundation initiatives. The space felt lighter, cleaner, more authentically me. Diana arrived for lunch, bringing news from her gallery. "You'll never guess who came in yesterday. Marcus's mother." My heart skipped. I hadn't spoken to her since everything happened. "How is she?" "Holding up. She wanted you to know she doesn't blame you. Said Marcus's father suspected something. Was wrong for months but couldn't prove it." We ate at our favorite cafe, the same one where we'd first started planning my response to Marcus's betrayal. The owner greeted us warmly. We'd become regulars during the months of investigation and preparation. "Look who just walked in," Diana murmured, nodding toward the door. Robert Anderson and his wife entered, holding hands and looking happier than I'd ever seen them. After the truth came out, they'd worked through their own issues, stronger for having faced the crisis together. They spotted us and came over. "Elizabeth," Mrs. Anderson smiled warmly, "I wanted to thank you again. The Foundation's workshop helped me understand everything I should have known years ago about our finances." "That's exactly why we started it," I replied. "Knowledge is power." Back. At the office, I had one final meeting with James and Michael, who had become more than just my lawyer and forensic accountant. They were family now, part of the support system that had helped me rebuild. "The last of Marcus's hidden accounts has been traced," Michael reported. "Everything's been recovered and properly distributed to the victims." James added, "The divorce is officially final. All assets have been divided according to the court's ruling." I signed the last document, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. "So that's it? It's really over?" "Legally, yes," James smiled. "But your story? I think it's just beginning." That evening, I stood in my new penthouse apartment, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold. The space was entirely mine, decorated to my taste, filled with memories I'd chosen to keep and new ones I was creating. My phone lit up with a text from Diana. "Drinks tonight?" The usual crowd had expanded over the months. Diana, Rachel, Margaret, even some of the other women who'd been affected by Marcus's schemes. We'd formed a kind of unofficial support group, helping each other heal and grow. "On Sao? My way," I replied. As I grabbed my coat, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who had stood frozen in Marcus's study doorway on her birthday. Stronger, wiser, but also more compassionate. I understood now that his betrayal hadn't broken me. It had revealed me. My phone buzzed again, a news alert about Sarah's sentencing. 5 years, just as expected. She'd looked small in the courtroom photos, nothing like the confident seductress who had thought she could take my life. I felt no satisfaction in her fate, only a quiet acknowledgement that justice had been served. The same justice that would keep Marcus behind bars, that had ended David Reynolds' legal career, that had exposed the truth to everyone who needed to see it. Downstairs, my driver waited to take me to meet the others. Carlos had been with me through everything, his quiet loyalty never wavering. "Good evening, Mrs. Shaw," he smiled, using my restored maiden name. "Good evening, Carlos," I replied, feeling truly at peace for the first time in months. "It's a beautiful night, isn't it?" As we drove through the city, I thought about all the women who would attend next month's foundation workshop. Each one would learn what I had learned the hard way, that true strength comes not from avoiding betrayal, but from surviving it, from turning pain into purpose. Marcus had thought he was writing the end of our story. Instead, he had only written the end of his own, leaving me free to begin again. And this time, I was writing my story exactly as I chose. 1 year after my birthday party that changed everything, I stood at the podium of the Boston Women's Leadership Conference, looking out over a sea of attentive faces. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was speaking in the same hotel ballroom where Marcus had once hosted his firm's annual galas. "Betrayal," I began, my voice steady, "doesn't define you. It reveals you. It shows you exactly who you are when everything you believed in falls apart." The audience was filled with familiar faces, survivors of similar betrayals, participants from our foundation's workshops, professional women seeking to protect themselves. In the front row, Diana beamed proudly while Rachel recorded the speech for our foundation's website. When I discovered my husband and his secretary planning to divorce me at my own birthday party, I had two choices. I continued. I could crumble, or I could rise. I chose to rise. Margaret sat near the back, nodding encouragingly. She'd become one of our most valuable mentors, helping other women recognize the warning signs she'd once tried to show me. Her experience had proven invaluable in developing our foundation's programs. "Financial literacy isn't just about understanding numbers," I explained. "It's about understanding power. Knowledge is power. Documentation is power. And most importantly, supporting other women is power." The Elizabeth Shaw Foundation had grown beyond our wildest expectations. We'd opened offices in 3 cities, offering workshops, legal support, and financial counseling to women facing similar situations. Every week brought new success stories, women who'd found their strength, protected their interests, rebuilt their lives. After the speech, during the reception, a young woman approached me. "Mrs. Shaw? I'm Jennifer, Marcus's former junior associate." I remembered her. She'd been one of the whistleblowers who came forward after his arrest. "Your testimony was very brave," I said. She smiled nervously. "I've been attending your foundation's workshops. They gave me the courage to start my own practice, focusing on helping women in similar situations." Throughout the evening, more stories emerged. Robert Anderson's wife had started a support group for partners of fraud victims. Sarah's sister was working with domestic violence shelters, teaching financial independence. Even Harrison and Palmer had established a pro bono program specifically for women facing financial manipulation. "Quite a change from last year," Diana commented as we watched the networking crowds. "Remember when you were just the perfect corporate wife hosting Marcus's parties?" I laughed softly. "That feels like another lifetime." My phone buzzed, a message from James. The final appeal in Marcus's case had been denied. He would serve his full sentence. David Reynolds had already begun his 12-year term, and Sarah was 6 months into her 5-year sentence. "Mrs. Shaw." A hotel staff member approached. "There's a call for you at the front desk. It's Mrs. Walker, Marcus's mother." I hadn't spoken to her since before the Maldives, though she'd sent several heartfelt letters of support. Taking a deep breath, I went to take the call. "Elizabeth." Her voice was warm, familiar. "I saw you were speaking today. I wanted to tell you how proud I am of what you've built from this tragedy." Tears pricked at my eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know. Marcus's father and I, She paused. We've been following your foundation's work. We'd like to make a donation, if you'll accept it. To help other women avoid what he did to you. The gesture touched me deeply. His parents choosing to support my mission of preventing others from experiencing what their son had done. Back in the ballroom, Rachel was organizing the next phase of our event, breakout sessions where women could connect, share experiences, and learn from each other. The energy in the room was electric, full of possibility and determination. Michael approached with exciting news. The governor's office called. They want to partner with the foundation to implement financial literacy programs in schools. Perfect timing, I smiled. We just finished developing our youth curriculum. The foundation had evolved far beyond its original scope. We now offered programs for teenagers, college students, and young professionals, teaching them to recognize and protect themselves from financial manipulation. Every week brought letters from women who'd found the strength to leave abusive situations, start their own businesses, reclaim their power. Diana joined us, champagne in hand. Have you seen the latest statistics? Reports of financial fraud are up 40% since last year. Not because there's more fraud, I noted, because more women are recognizing it and reporting it. They're not staying silent anymore. As the evening wound down, I found myself back at the podium, looking out over the women who remained, networking, supporting each other, building connections that would last long after the conference ended. 1 year ago, I addressed them. I thought my life was over. My husband and his secretary had planned to humiliate me, take everything I'd built, leave me with nothing. But they gave me something invaluable instead. They showed me my own strength. The room fell silent. Every face turned toward me. They thought they were writing my ending. Instead, they wrote their own. And in doing so, they gave all of us, a new beginning. Later that night, in my penthouse office, I reviewed the day's success with my core team. The foundation was expanding again, adding new programs, reaching more women. We'd recently purchased the building next door to accommodate our growth. Look at this, Rachel said, pulling up our latest impact report. Over 10,000 women helped in the past year. $15 million in assets protected. Countless lives changed. Diana raised her glass. To turning pain into power. To supporting each other, Margaret added. To new beginnings, I finished. My phone lit up with one final message from Vivian at the Boston Globe. She was working on a follow-up story, documenting the ripple effects of Marcus's case, how one woman's refusal to be victimized had sparked a movement. I stepped out onto my terrace, looking out over the city I'd once seen through Marcus's eyes. Now I saw it through my own, a landscape of possibilities, of women helping women, of strength built from broken places. The betrayal that was meant to destroy me had instead created something powerful, something lasting. Marcus had planned to write my ending, but he'd only succeeded in writing my prologue. The real story, my story, was just beginning. And this time, I held the pen. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.